Hello, sixth graders. This is Miss Smith from Eisenhower School with your second lesson on medieval music. Today, we will be discussing medieval instruments, and you will get an introduction to Guido d'Arezzo. By the end of this week's lesson, you will be able to identify instruments of the medieval period, and you will also be able to identify the contributions that Guido d'Arezzo made to music. You will be taking a short exit ticket at the end of today's lesson.
I'm going to take a look at this video now. You'll see several of the instruments from the medieval period.
Yeah, well, first of all, this is the simplest thing. This is a recorder. And this is, if you think of a recorder when you're in school, it's about the same size, but it has more turns and like nicely turned furniture leg. That's actually because that's a Baroque style of instrument. This is a copy of instrument around 1600 or 1620. So it's a little bit different. And this is, they used to just call this the flute or the flauto dolce. The recorder comes from the word remember, recordare, because that's what birds did to their mother's song. They remembered him. This was probably the simplest and was associated with shepherds and things. But people also played variations on this. So, for instance, I might play a tune like, I might go like this. Or I might go. I messed up, but you get the idea. I could do divisions. Greensleeves, for instance, a favorite recorder piece. If I go, but another version of Greensleeves is, that's a variation on Greensleeves. Same chord progression. Now, here's an instrument that has an oboe inside. Conical bore chanter. It's got some tuning tape on there. You don't pretend you don't see that. And it. Because I play it in a bag, I'm blowing it back. I can't articulate with my tongue like I do on other wind instruments, as I did on the recorder. So I use my fingers. And listen to this. This is not going to be perfectly in tune because I didn't know you wanted me to play bagpipes today. So another way of tuning this is to play a very short melody note. Now, this is the chanter. It means that's the singer. The word cantare, you know that word, chant? That's the part that sings. And here is the drone. And you're going to notice this is made out of plastic and metal, but the original drones like this are just made out of cane with a tongue slit out by a knife. And that's the origin of the clarinet style reed. There's a kind of bagpipe called the Hummelchen, which means the little bumblebee, because this is called the Hummel, the drone. You know the composer Hummel. And now I've got a shoelace that I borrowed from one of my students when my strap broke. This is just to keep this is going to be one thing that's going to be different from what you think of Highland pipes. My drone is going to stick out in front. Not in tune yet, but you get the idea. I've got my bag keeps the air pressure like a football, and then the air goes out of these two tubes. The name for the bagpipe, actually, there are lots of names. Dudelsack means duduksak, a flute with a sack, a pipe with a sack. But zamponia means sound together, symphonia. But another word, gaida, means goat. Gaida comes from the Semitic root of the word gadi, gadi, which is goat's body, and you'll actually see that the guy that has the horns and the whole thing, and when you inflate that, little bones inflate out of that thing, and it looks. This is the bagpipe chanter, and removed from the bagpipe chanter with a double reed, same kind of reed in there, and this reed, when I blow into it, it crows. This is what's called the crow. That's the reed vibrating, opening and closing. Now here it is a little more controlled. And that's really working like my vocal cords, I think. And then I put it on this amplifier, and that's what makes this is the instrument that is the Renaissance version of the oboe. It's the shawm. I think of this instrument in one of two ways. I either think I'm playing in C like a soprano instrument, or in G like a G alto kind of instrument, depending on the music I'm reading. But in fact, the bottom note is D. But in fact, the bottom note is D at A465, which means it's a modern E flat. So they didn't think the same pitches we did, same ways, and they differed by instruments. But this is this was that instrument they used for improvising dance tunes over dance music. And I'll give you just a little. Here's what it sounds like. Outdoor instrument, very directional. You can see, will I kill you if I do this? Here's the direction how. So this is really made for outdoor playing. They're made to play in pairs of shawms or in trios or quartets with trombones or trumpets, and they're made to play really pure intervals. So when you hear a fifth on this, a pure fifth, boom, it rings out. Improvisational style, they'd use syncopation, things like this. Yeah, well, first of all, this is.
So you can see a little bit closer here some of the instruments. We have the recorder, the shawm, the bagpipe, harp, and the vielle.
Guido de Arezzo was born in 991 or 992. It is unclear exactly what year he was born, and that's because record keeping wasn't exactly their strong suit in the medieval period, or the records have disappeared since then. Guido de Arezzo was a monk from Arezzo, Italy. In his early career, he realized how difficult it was for singers to remember the numerous Gregorian chants they had to sing. Remember, monks sang their prayers multiple times a day. Each time they sang, the words and melodies could change. Also, the words and melodies would change depending upon what season they were in the church. Guido de Arezzo developed a method for singers to remember the chants. However, he was first met with opposition, which prompted him to find another job. He moved to Arezzo, where his ideas were welcomed. Some of these methods that he invented involved what we now call staff lines, musical notation, and solfege. We will dive deeper into these inventions on the next 2 slides. In this video, we will take a look at how music notation evolved over time. It's okay if you don't understand everything in this video. The important thing to realize is that music notation changed from what Guido de Arezzo gave us to what we know now.
So most students in elementary school learn how to read musical notation. They learn the note heads and the lines of the staff and possibly even read some of it on recorders or other instruments. But what I find lacking in a lot of these discussions is why music notation is the way it is. If necessity is the mother of invention, what was the necessity that led to this innovation? And what did the great-grandmothers of our current innovations look like? Well, strap in. I've got a lot of information to give you and only a few minutes to give it. Hi, welcome to the Listener's Guide. I'm Steve, and as we've discussed in previous episodes, a lot of Western music history has its roots in the medieval Catholic Church, and notation is no different. The earliest systems that we have of music notation are called neumes, and they were simply squiggles above religious texts that were designed to jog monks' memories while they were performing the Mass. They were codified, but as you can see, they don't really tell you anything unless you had already learned the chant orally. And this imprecision was a very big problem of the Catholic Church, who was interested in standardizing the Mass across the entire empire. Enter Guido of Arezzo, a music educator so important that he deserves his own video. But for our purposes today, all we need to discuss is that he developed a 4-line staff with one or more of the lines labeled by letter so that the pitches could be accurately represented. And in fact, this system was so revolutionary that it's basically what we use today. You may notice, for instance, that this clef labeling the G and D lines looks curiously similar to the modern-day treble clef. So this system spread quickly at the hands of the church. Now performers could read and perform music without having to have heard it first. But there was one major problem. Because it could only reflect pitch and wasn't very good at reflecting duration, it was only effective for notating chant music because chant music was the only music that was performed that way. By the 13th century, however, people had begun to adapt the symbology of Gregorian chant to reflect this sense of rhythm. Notes were essentially divided into long and short, and in fact, those were the symbols' names, except in Latin, long and breve. Now, because some notes are incredibly long and other notes are incredibly short, the system was expanded, but the idea remained pretty much the same. With this innovation of rhythm, we see a massive outpouring of other kinds of music, especially of the secular variety. Now that people could accurately write down the music that they came up with, we also had a new kind of musician show up, a composer. People wanted to take credit for the music that they were creating. Throughout the Renaissance and into the Baroque era, technology also continued to develop, which had its own effect on notation. You may have noticed, for instance, that so far most of the notes we've seen have been very thick, very black notes, which are easy to write with a calligraphy pen on parchment, but become rather runny when applied to paper. And for this reason, we start to see a shift toward what we call white note notation, where the notes are mostly made up of outlines instead of being filled in. This was also advantageous after the development of the printing press because it allowed printers to save ink. The notes grew rounder over time and developed into the ones that you may be more familiar with today. We also see the addition of the bar line around the 16th and 17th centuries, which gave greater visual clarity to. So most students in elementary school learn how to read musical notation. They learn the note heads and the lines of the staff, and possibly even read some of it on recorders or.
In this video, we will learn about how Guido de Arezzo invented the solfege syllables that we know today. However, do wasn't always do, and T wasn't always T. Guido de Arezzo had different syllables in mind when he first invented this. Have a listen to see what those syllables were.
Let's start at the very beginning.
A very good place to start. When you read, you begin with A, B, C. When you sing, you begin with
Oot, re, mi.
Oot.
That's right. The names we use for musical notes date back about 1,000 years to a Benedictine monastery in the Italian city of Arezzo. At the time, music had changed very quickly in a short space of time, so the monks in Arezzo were confused about which note was which, until their leader, the great Guido d'Arezzo, fell on the brilliant idea of giving each note a name. He took a prayer they all knew very well. Ut queant laxis. They said it every day. It's a plea to St. John the Baptist that he might loosen their throats so they could sing more freely. Guido named the notes of the scale using the first syllable in each line of that prayer. Oot.
Re, mi, fa, sol, la, si.
And by the way, that last one, C, S-I, standing for Sancta Johannes, or St. John, was changed to T in 1841 by a music educator named Sarah Glover. From the mystery of the saints to tea, a drink with jam and bread. She was English.
Tom, can we get back to Guido d'Arezzo?
Guido's system worked so well that it quickly spread across Europe and became known as solfa singing, or solfège, as it's still called by music teachers around the world today. It was fantastic. But there was a problem. 6 of those note names were perfect. Good, strong consonants at the beginning, nice open vowel sound at the end, like re, mi, or fa. But it took until the year 1650, 700 years, for somebody to finally say what everyone had been thinking all along. That the very first one, oot, just wasn't that much fun to sing. The guy who fixed that problem was a musicologist named Giovanni Doni. And I guess he figured if somebody was going to be immortalized in song, it may as well be him. That's right. When we needed a better beginning, Doni gave us the beginning of his own name. And that's how we got the do in do, re, mi. And sure, you could say Giovanni Doni was being a little bit self-serving. But if it weren't for him, people at costume parties and sing-alongs around the world would sound completely different.
Oot, a deer, a female deer. Re, a drop of golden sign. Me, a name I call myself. Fa, a long, long way to run. So, a red. La, a note to follow soul. Si, for Sancta Johannes. That will bring us back to Oot. Oot, re, mi, fa, sol, la, si, oot, so, oot.
Do, re, mi, take 4, scene 4. Hey, I'm Tom Power.
Please take the Medieval Music Week 2 exit ticket found in your Google Classroom. Once you are finished, please click Submit and wait for further directions from your teacher.
Okay, so right now I want you to take the Medieval Music Week 2 exit ticket found in my Google Classroom. I will be here for the rest of today's music period if you have any questions or need any help.